I'm here to talk about the generally spoken but least aware topics that is finding its utmost relevance in today's age and time. Legal implications for online business or e-commerce business in India. As you are all aware, in this technical and digital internet driven times that we are currently living in, having an online presence for any business is very common thing, thus inspiring even small retailers to upgrade their business styles and learnings and to set up and start their e-commerce business. E-commerce as an industry is growing rapidly. Online shopping is one of the many industries that has been extensively grown over the past few years. The government to promote and encourage the same has been seen making conscious efforts and is bringing in many regulatory changes to promote the e-commerce industry, thereby making India as one of the key markets for e-commerce stakeholders globally. It is noteworthy that the government, with its campaigns such as Atmanirbhar Bharat, Vocal for Locals, has been putting in efforts to boost the local and the homegrown e-commerce entities. E-commerce is a method of conducting business through an electronic medium rather than through the conventional physical means. Such e-commerce means and electronic means include click and buy methods using computers as well as m-commerce, which makes use of various mobile devices or smartphones. The rapid popularity and acceptance of e-commerce to the world is driven by greater customer choice and improved convenience in commercial transactions, which help the internet where the vendor or the merchants can sell their products and services directly to the customer, and the payments can be made through electronic transfer systems through debit card, credit cards, net bankings, etc. In India, at present, we have no structured law for e-commerce business. Hence, different businesses are governed by different rules, laws, regulations, circulars, directives, guidelines, and knowingly which ones apply to which business is very critical. In addition to commonly applicable laws such as your Companies Act, Indian Contact Act, GST laws, income tax laws, Shop and Establishment Act, intellectual property laws, etc., e-commerce has governed by Information Technology Act, data protection laws in India as and when it is going to be passed, global and EU GDPR, Payment and Settlement Systems Act, and other RBI regulations on payment mechanisms, Consumer Protection Act, Competition Act, and such other laws and specific laws. Today, we will discuss some of the important aspects relating to an online business. The type of business entity that shall be the most suited for your business and the investment model, keeping in mind the relaxation, taxation, and other benefits and subsidies available to that business under various types of legal structures are your sole proprietaries, one person company, partnership firm, public limited company, private limited company, limited liability partnership. It is actually very pertinent to note that in such structures, it is very important to have a company form of structure, as this is the type of entity that can allow for angel funding, equity funding, or an external funding as a type of equity in return of the investments made further is the most successful type of e-commerce ventures. Based on the type of entity chosen by the client, incorporating and registration of the legal entity can occur. Investments in e-commerce space has always given a question to foreign direct investments in India, which is regulated under the Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999, commonly known as the FEMA. The Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, the DIPP, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India makes policy pronouncements on FDI through press notes and press releases, which are notified by the Reserve Bank of India as amendments to Foreign Exchange Management Regulations 2000. The consolidated FDI policy issued by the DIPP lays down two entry routes for these investments. One, the automatic route, where foreign investments do not require prior approval of the government. Two, the government approval route, where a prior approval of the Government of India through the Foreign Investment Promotion Board, FIPB, is required. The current regulatory status with respect to foreign investments in the e-commerce state are as follows. 100% FDI is allowed under the automatic route, that is, no FIPB approval is required in companies engaged in B2B e-commerce. 2. No FDI is allowed in companies which engage in single brand retail trading by means of e-commerce. And 3. No FDI is allowed in companies which engage in multiple brand retail trading by means of e-commerce. These restrictions are related to sale of goods and services. Now comes the second most important thing, that is drafting of these legal documents. While selling online products or services, as the case may be, it is important to protect the business and the promoters of the business through drafting of various legal documents that not only set out clear roles, responsibilities, and duties of the parties in the concern, but also protect them in the event of breach of these duties, roles, and responsibilities by one party. Some of the common types of legal documentations are your business agreements. Considering the type of entity, agreements such as promoters, co-founder agreements, your shareholder agreements, partnership deeds, we and I will start with it. Second, come from vendor agreements. All e-commerce entities must have in place an agreement with their vendors listed on their online portal. If your client is engaged in selling its own products only, then an agreement with suppliers should be in place. This agreement should clearly define the rights and obligations of both the parties, the scope of the relationship, including the roles and responsibilities of the parties, how default by either party will be dealt with, payment and payment terms. However, these agreements need not be uploaded online. Your another most important agreement is your confidentiality and a non-disclosure agreement. Every high-hello conversation, discussions, exchange of information relating to e-commerce business should begin with signing an NDA. You wouldn't want your client's business secrets or ideas that are not yet on paper to be stolen and duplicated. A carefully drafted, watertight, and a mutual NDA should serve the purpose and save the day. Employee contracts. Ideally, an effective employee contracts shall be the one that contains the terms of employment, outlines the responsibility and duty of every employee, KPIs, that's your key performance indicators, your key result areas, remunerations, employment benefits, etc. Additionally, since employees are subject to a lot of insider information of the business, signing an employment agreement before his or her recruitment shall contain a clause on confidentiality and non-disclosure would be a smarter way to go out with. Assignment of intellectual property. If any entity has a business concept or an idea that is built on or with the aid of intellectual property rights in whole or in part, then executing this agreement shall bind every person who works in a manner for the entity, including your freelancers, your promoters, to assign all individual property they create to the entity, so that once they leave, or if they happen to leave the organization, the IPR remains intact with the entity. Almost all of the value of the venture will be the intellectual property rights created, since IPR is considered as the most valuable intangible asset for any entity. Thus, to be precise, without having a legal title to an IPR, your entity may be majorly undervalued in today's world. Now comes another topic, that's on website policies. I'm often asked this question by all my clients. Why website policies? What is the need of website policies? Let me take you through these needs. Having a website terms and conditions inform the website users of their rights and responsibilities on the website and limit your client's company's liability to the maximum possible extent. A privacy policy states that will be done with the information that users submit on the website. These terms and conditions and privacy policies are the two most important policies that are essential for every e-commerce website. Data protection is a very important aspect. whereby which it places a strict responsibility on the website owners to employ adequate safeguards and measures to protect the information of their users through their obtained websites. Failing to employ these adequate safeguards and measures to protect the data would attract heavy fines and penalties and even imprisonment. Another question that I'm again commonly asked is, can I copy paste? What if I use those freely available templates that are available online? Well, my answer to that is surely a major no. With the increasing awareness of the need to protect the personal data, users have become more cautious and aware of what they share and whom do they share this information with. All of your templates that you find online are only general and not specifically suited to your client's business, which of course would not protect your clients against the legal claims and fines. Let me be clear, to have website policies should not be treated as a mere tickmark activity, but should be drafted in a manner that it can be used as a protective shield for protecting the business interests of your clients. It should not be approached as a one size fits all for everyone. Some of the most common forms of e-contracts are your click wrap contracts, browse contracts, shrink wrap contracts. A browse wrap agreement is intended to be binding on contracting parties by mere use or browsing of the website. They are these agreements that contain the terms and conditions of use for a website as they are posted on the website. Have you ever visited a website? Down below, there will be a tab which takes you to the terms and conditions. These are your browse wrap agreements. Second, we come to shrink wrap agreements. These are contracts packed with the products. Usage of the products here is deemed to be accepted in the contract. In case of a shrink wrap agreement, the contracting party can read the terms and conditions only after opening the delivery box within which the product is packed. In each of these contracts, the terms and conditions of the contracts are made available to the contracting party in the form that is significantly different from the usual paper contracts. In case of a click wrap contract, the contracting party's affirmative acceptance is taken by means of checking an I click tab that says I accept. Also, there is typically a scroll box that allows the contracting party to view the terms and conditions. Unless expressly prohibited under any statute, e-contracts are like your click-wrap agreement if the requirements of a valid contract as per the Indian Contract Act are fulfilled, which are the contract should be entered with free consent of the contracting parties, there should be a lawful consideration, the party should be competent to contract, and the object of the contract should be lawful. Consequently, the terms and conditions which are associated with any e-commerce platform are of utmost importance in determining and ensuring that the e-commerce transactions meet with the requirements of a valid contract. The terms and conditions associated with an e-contract has to remain in conformity with the Indian Contract Act. Irrespective of the mode of click wrap or a shrink wrap or a browse wrap agreement, to enter into a contract or any other mode recognized by the IT Act. But all of these aspects in the e-commerce contract come into play only when there is a dispute. Some issues arise out of an e-commerce may make an e-contract void ab initio, thus rendering the contracts inadmissible as evidence in the court of law. Further, the e-contracts in itself may be held unconscionable for providing no option of negotiations. Here, the question then arises whether such standard form contracts are considered unconscionable and may be struck down by the courts. US courts have not been averse in treating such standard contracts as unconscionable, making them liable to be struck down in the facts and circumstances of every case. In India, there is no such development over the jurisprudence on the issues of whether standard form online agreements are unconscionable. However, certain provisions under the Indian Contract Act deal with unconscionable contracts, such as when the consideration in the contract or the object of the contract is opposed by public policy. Thus, Indian law on e-commerce has little guidance over such serious issues. Website policies are the click-wrap contracts between the business and the customer buyer and are extremely important legal requirements as they form an agreement between your client and the customer who purchases the products and services of your client. Broadly, the website policies consist of your website terms and conditions, your privacy policy, user policy, cookie policy, general data protection regulations that govern these policies, that's your GDPR. One of the most carefully draft these policies, keeping business needs in mind and the target audience along with the business operations. Within the above, website terms and conditions should mandatorily consist of A, your limitation of liability, disclaimers, refund policies, your return policies, exchange policy, conditions for sale of these policies, payment terms, shipping and delivery policy for products and alteration of service policies, upgradation policy and updation of policies for services. Privacy policy. For an e-commerce platform, it is at most difficult to complete an online transaction without collecting some form of personal information of each of the users, such as details about their identity and financial information. Apart from the collection of primary data from the users, e-commerce platforms may also collect a variety of other indirect information, such as users' personal choices and preferences and patterns of search. Hence, an important consideration of every e-commerce platform is to maintain the privacy of the users. Two primarily concerns that a user of e-commerce platforms would have are unauthorized access to personal information, misuse of such personal information. This policy outlines and discloses of ways a business website gathers, uses, discloses, and manages a customer or a client's database. What kinds of personal information the website gathers about its users, and how is collected information kept safe by the business that owns the website. The concept of privacy and data protection were not addressed in Indian legislation. In the absence of specific legislation, the Supreme Court of India held in its case of Justice K.S. Puttaswamy and others versus Union of India and others has held right to privacy as a fundamental right. Subject to certain reasonable restrictions, it highlighted the need for data protection laws to control the action of non-state parties. It also called upon the government to form a data protection regime. A notification has issued under Section 43A of the IT Act, providing a framework for the protection of data, particularly relating to personal information and sensitive personal data. Personal information relates to the identity of the person, and the sensitive personal data includes information on password, bank accounts or credit card or debit card or other payment instruments, etc. The notification casts obligations for the protection of privacy in relation to personal information and sensitive personal information on punishment as provided under the IT Act, besides making the entities liable for monetary compensations. Then comes your user policy. This policy is a cluster of predefined rules and practices. What a user can do, what a user cannot do, that a user must agree to for the access to the website. It also outlines potential consequences of violation before assuming and issuing any kind of login credentials into the system to any user. This policy is applicable and of utmost importance to websites that require to give logins to their customers. Cookie policies. Cookie policies are built specifically for internet web browsers to track, personalize, and save information about each user's session. A session just refers to the time you spend on the site. Cookies are created to identify you when you visit a new website. Cookies are text files with small piece of data like your username and password that are used to identify your computer as you use your computer network. If a business website tracks or uses cookies, then this policy is a must-have. It is a declaration by the business website to its users regarding what cookies are active on their website, what kind of user data is tracked by the website, and for what purpose and where in the world is this data sent. GDPR. The European Union released new rules related to data privacy, which came into an effect on the 25th May 2018. You might have noticed a massive number of websites asking permissions to accept these cookie policies. Many terms and conditions and privacy policy updates by way of disclaimers when you use any of these websites, or they simply flood your inbox. All of this is because of introduction of GDPR. Now, what exactly is GDPR? GDPR is a general data protection regulation, essentially protects the EU citizens from the data breach and the privacy misconducts. The new regulation requires organizations to provide EU citizens with information and transparency about how the data is stored and collected. EU citizens also have the right to their information removed from the database of the organization. Now the question comes here, why is GDPR important to us? Wherever your business is located, any association with EU citizens makes you affected by these GDPR. Hence, it is crucial for you to ensure that your website is GDPR ready to be able to serve the EU citizens. To make sure that your website is GDPR compliant, one must make sure that the following rules are in place. Number one, creation of privacy policy, which should be easy to access, should be concise and in a very clear language. Number two, adding cookie notifications. This GDPR requires websites that receive traffic from EU to get the visitor's consent to use these cookies. 3. The GDPR requires you to obtain consent whenever you collect data from the visitor of your website. You should gain consent for everything, ranging from your contact information, your emails, names, etc. To do this, all websites with the EU traffic must have a field in contact forms or email list signups where users can provide consent when giving information to you. 4. Adding the terms and services. If you have any online e-commerce store, you need to add your customers' consent to process every data of theirs. 5. The notification for policy updates or data breach. Have a system in place to inform users about policy updates and the data breaches. You can use an email blast to update your users about these policy changes. And lastly, analytics, tracking, and remarketing. This refers to any third-party service or plugins you use that collects the data. This includes your Google Analytics, Google AdWords, remarketing services, and e-commerce analytics. Although GDPR may seem to be very intimidating, it is actually beneficial to everybody. It aims to prevent the future data breaches and protects people and their businesses. Our India's data protection bill is largely inspired from these GDPR regulations. Now, often comes the question, what is this data? Data is not only collected online, but it's also collected offline. Do you know that when you attend events or seminars, you register your name, mobile numbers, and email IDs, and this information is collected and circulated by varied companies, and then you start receiving emails and you may receive phone calls for promotion and ads. Your data is not just your name, email, or name. It comprises of other financial data, genetic data, biometric data, sensitive personal data. All of this data is your big data, which is collected by various companies for algorithm profiling. This algorithm profiling is used to understand persons' preferences, behavior patterns, etc., and thus it helps to target the customers. Once the algorithm profiling is done, the data is segregated into groups and categories, which is called the data profiling, which helps the companies to select their target customers. Here is the need for the Personal Data Protection Bill to be passed as soon as possible. The other most important data is your location. You are aware that your location is being tracked down and often you are asked to give ratings to places you have visited. As you all know, the famous Uber data breach case in the year 2016 that exposed the data and the information of over 57 million globally as their locations were exposed due to the God's View tool, which was misused, and Uber had to pay heavy consideration amount by way of damages. Thus, looking at few instances in our day-to-day lives, data privacy and protection becomes very important. India is marching towards the digital era, and upon realizing the importance of data privacy, it has implemented various rules which are similar on the lines of GDPR. The bill proposes to divide the data into three categories. One, personal data, which means data about or relating to a natural person who is directly or indirectly identifiable, having regard to any characteristic trait, attributes, or any other feature of identity of such natural person. Sensitive personal data is number two, which means personal data revealing, related to, or constituting, or as may be applicable, your passwords, financial data, health data, official identifier, sex life, sexual orientation, biometric data, genetic data, transgender statuses, intersex status, caste or tribe, religious or political beliefs, or any other category of data specified by the authority. And lastly is the critical personal data, which means such personal data as may be notified by the central government to be critical personal data. Applicability of this bill. The bill proposes to apply on the processing of personal data where such data has been collected, disclosed, shared, or otherwise processed within the territory of India. The bill also proposes to apply on the processing of personal data by the state, an Indian company, any Indian citizen, or any person or a body of persons incorporated or created under the Indian law. The bill proposes to apply on processing of personal data by data fiduciaries or data processors not present within the territory of India, only if such processing is in connection with the business carried out in India or in any systematic activity of offering goods and services to data principals within the territory of India, or in connection with activities which involves profiling of data principals within the territory of India. Now, what is this data fiduciary? Data fiduciary means any person, including the state, a company, any juristic entity, or any individual who alone or in conjunction with others determine the person and meaning of processing of personal data. Data principal means the natural person to whom the personal data relates to. Data processor means a person, including the state or a company, any juristic entity or any individual who processes the personal data on behalf of this data fiduciary. Data fiduciary should also mention source of collection of data if it is not collected from the data principal. The data fiduciary shall also mention the time limit for which the data will be stored. Thus, personal data shall be deleted after the usage and cannot be stored, circulated, and used in perpetuity. Data localization. How many of us have thought what happens to the personal and financial information that is collected when we use our Master or Visa credit cards or create an account on an Amazon or a Netflix? How is the financial and personal information processed or stored? Well, as of today's date, majority of such information is either partly or completely stored outside India. Data localization implies that the entities collecting or processing data should store such data on local servers within the territorial jurisdiction of the country, as well as permit the transfer of such data outside the country, subject to a reasonable level of protection being accorded to the same, irrespective of where it is being transferred. To this, on April 6, 2018, RBI issued a circular titled Storage of Payment System Data, which directed all payment system providers to make sure that the data relating to their payment systems should be stored in systems located within the territorial jurisdiction of India. Payment system providers had been provided a tight deadline until October 5, 2018 to comply with the same, making companies from around the world scramble to conform to the RBI's deadline for localization. Both GDPR and the Personal Data Protection Bill try to regulate profiling of individuals. This may be due to the control, the economic disparity, racial profiling, gender discrimination. In line with GDPR, the PDP bill mandates a data protection impact assessment. The 2019 bill mandates that all processing of critical personal data outside India is prohibited. However, the transfer of such critical personal data is permitted to a person or an entity engaged in provision of health services or emergency services in specified circumstances, or to any country or entity or class of entity approved by the central government. Now, in the event of the new methods of conducting business, particularly electronic commerce, brought about the new and the need for payment systems that are both tech savvy and efficient at the same time. This has led to a phenomenal growth of electronic payment systems around the world. Payment systems, both traditional and electronic in India, are regulated by the Payment Settlement System Act 2007, which is commonly known as the PSS Act. The PSS Act empowers the RBI to govern payment systems operationals in the country. In addition to the PSS Act, there are many several other rules and regulations which are established by RBI that govern a system that involves the clearing, the payments or the settlement of a payment depending upon the nature of the service or undertaking involved. The increased use of internet has led to a virtual world which is not possible to be restricted in terms of traditional concepts of territory. Therefore, in e-commerce transactions, if a business derives customer from a particular country as a result of their website, it may be required to defend any litigation that may result in that country. As a result, any content placed on an e-commerce platform should be reviewed for the compliance with the laws of any jurisdiction when an organization wishes to market, promote, or sell their products or services, as it may run the risk of being sued in any jurisdiction, where the goods are brought or where the services are availed of. Jurisprudence in India with respect to issues relating to jurisdiction and enforcement issues in e-commerce is still at a very nascent stage. In general, a lot of local statutes provide for a long-arm jurisdiction whereby the operations of such local laws have extraterritorial applications if an act or an omission has resulted in some illegal or prejudicial effect within the territory of the country. Below, we set out certain provisions of Indian laws which provide for long-arm jurisdiction. You have your Consumer Protection Act, in the view of which new models of the business e-commerce, it is very important to keep in mind consumer protection issues. In India, the Consumer Protection Act 1986, which is known as the CPA, governs the relationship between the consumers and the service good providers. There is no separate consumer protection law that is specific to and relates to online transactions. Liability under the CPA arises when there is a deficiency in service or a defect in goods or occurrence of any unfair trade practices. The CPA specifically excludes from its ambit rendering to any services that are free of charge. If actual sales are taking place on an online platform, the users will be considered as consumers under the CPA, and its provisions will apply to the sale of the products by these online platforms. Second, you have your Information Technology Act 2000. This is the most important act that is governing the entire e-commerce portal in India. Section 1 2 of the IT Act, read along with Section 7.5 of the IT Act, provides that the Act shall extend to the whole of India and, save as otherwise provided under the Act, it shall apply also to any or contraventions thereunder committed outside India by any person, and the Act shall apply to any offense or contravention committed outside India by any person if an act or conduct constituting the offense or contravention involves a computer system, or a computer network located in India. For the e-commerce ventures that distribute content or act as a platform for distributors or exchange of third-party information content, compliance with content regulation assumes a paramount importance. There is no single legislation in India that would deal with regulations of the contents in India. Rather, there are plethora of legislations would come into play coupled with judicial interpretations. Intermediaries, as defined under the IT Act, is any person who, on behalf of another person, receives, stores, or transmits that record, or provides any service with respect to that record, and includes telecom service providers, network service providers, internet service providers, web hosting service providers, search engines, online payment sites, online auction sites, online marketplaces, and your cyber places. When an e-commerce website merely provides a platform and acts as an intermediary between different parties, the question arises here is, what is the extent of the liability of such e-commerce companies for the act of a third party? Is the intermediary to be held liable for the action of the third party who may use its platform provided by the intermediary for its illegal activities? For this, the Section 79 of the IT Act provides for exemptions to the liability of these intermediaries. The certain requirements has to be fulfilled, such as intermediary merely provides access to the communication system over which the information made available by the third party is transmitted or temporarily stored or hosted. Or if the intermediary does not at any instance initiate the transmission, determine the receiver of the transmission, and chooses or alters the information contained in the transmission. The intermediary observes due diligence or any guidelines issued by the central government in that regard. To this, the Supreme Court's landmark judgment in the case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, the petitioners inter alia challenged the constitutionality of the Section 79 of the IT Act and the intermediary rules, stating that these provisions were vague and broad and in violence with Article 19 of the Constitution of India, which provides for the fundamental right to the freedom of speech and expression and certain reasonable restrictions to the fundamental right. This judgment of the Supreme Court has provided some clarity reading down the provisions of Section 9 and the intermediary rules, stating that the intermediary must receive a court order or a notification from a government agency for removing any specific information or content. However, there is still no clarity on which specific administrative agencies would have the authority to issue such orders. Another question that arises, and the major problem, that is identity of theft and impersonation. The IT Act provides that the identity of a person shall be deemed to have been stolen when any unique identification of a person, which may include your electronic signature or a password, is fraudulently or dishonestly used. The Act prescribes a penalty of imprisonment up to 3 years and fine to INR 1 lakh. The ITI provides that whosoever, by means of any communication device or a computer resource, cheats by impersonation shall be punished and imprisoned for 3 years and fine up to 1 lakh. Another governing law is the Indian Penal Code 1869. Section 3 of the IPC provides that any person who is liable by Indian law to be tried for an offense committed beyond India shall be dealt with according to the provisions of the IPC for any act committed beyond India in the same manner as if such act had been committed within India. There does not seem too much jurisprudence in India on the issues of jurisdiction in cases of e-commerce. However, there are some instances whereby the court had in the preliminary stages assumed jurisdiction over a matter. In the case of SMC Pneumatics India Private Limited versus Jogesh Vatra, the Delhi High Court assumed jurisdiction where a corporate's reputation was being defamed through the emails. Intellectual property rights. An e-commerce business, you need to ensure that your client is not in violation of the third party's intellectual property, while also ensuring that your client's intellectual property is protected. Step one should be ensuring that the name, the brand name, company's name, the website name, product name, etc., chosen to operate or sell under or be identified with isn't already existing in someone else's name. If you're sure of uniqueness of the name, it would be very important to file with the trademark registry. This is predominantly deciding the name of your company, the website domain name, and the brand name to be used that is not infringing the IPR of any third party. One must ensure the authenticity of the brands being sold on the website. Further, in the event of a violation of a third-party IPR by sale of duplicate, fake copies of items of such third parties, knowingly or unknowingly, will lead to a legal notice from the original owners of the IPR to your client. Often e-commerce websites outsource the designing, development, and content creation of the website to the third-party contractors. It is pertinent to be aware of the terms and conditions under which such IPR has been licensed to your client. In the event of engagement of freelancers, whether paid or unpaid, a conclusive agreement should be drafted and executed between the freelancers and the clients that clearly outline the terms on which the IPR shall be assigned to your client by such freelancers. The issue here would be who would the IP in the design and functionality of the website and in the content be owned by. Some of the important points for consideration in such circumstances would be a pre-written agreement that clearly spells out the ownership of IP, including the clauses of the terms, territory, and the nature of the right. Secondly, if a third-party IP is used by the contractor, it is very important to understand the chain of title with respect to such third-party IP, whether appropriate permissions have been acquired by such third parties. It is essential to understand that not all content available on the public domain can be used freely without obtaining the necessary permission or the rights from the owners of such content. Content could range from an information to logos of third party. In all of these instances, the IP, such as the copyright or the trademark, is owned by a third party, and the e-commerce business necessarily has to obtain the requisite approvals. Similarly, by providing links, hyperlinks, or tagging any third-party websites is a concern that needs to be addressed as well, as clearly without the permission of the owner of the website, hyperlinking and tagging shall be considered as an infringement. In India, it is a very silent and an important issue, that is the domain name disputes. A company that commences e-commerce activities would at first have to get its domain name registered. A domain name registry will not register two identical domain names, but can register similar domain names. This leads to a situation where deceptively similar domain names can be registered by a third party. There is no specific Indian law on domain names except judicial pronouncements. Indian courts have been proactive in granting orders against the use of infringing domain names. The takeaway is that domain name serves the same function as that of a trademark, and it is not protection as a trademark that even an act of passing off can be filed for domain names. In fact, in the case of Satyam Info Limited versus CFINet Solutions Private Limited, the Supreme Court has held that the domain name may pertain to the provisions of services within the meaning of the Section 2Z of the Trademark Act 1999. In the event of infringement by any party, the remedies available under law are A, the temporary or a permanent injunction against the infringer prohibiting the infringement, B, damages to the extent of lost profit, C, order for accounts of profits, and D, order for seizure or destruction of the infringement product. In addition to civil remedies for infringement above, there are some criminal provisions or imprisonment up to 3 years applying for false trademark or knowingly infringing a copyright. A rapid e-commerce has created the need for a vibrant and effective regulatory mechanisms which would strengthen the legal infrastructure that is crucial to the success of an e-commerce in India. It has always been the allegation that the weak cybersecurity laws in India and the absence of proper e-commerce regulatory framework is the reason for what an Indian people as an e-commerce industries face so many challenges in enjoying a customer-friendly, a consumer-friendly, and a business-confident e-commerce environment in India. India has no dedicated e-commerce regulatory other than the IT Act, which regulates the e-commerce business and transactions in India. So the government needs to step up and as fast as possible pass in their data protection bill. I would like to conclude with this and would like to thank Lee for giving me this wonderful opportunity and this amazing opportunity to speak to these wonderful audiences. Thank you so much.
Can a practicing advocate be a dormant partner in a partnership firm dealing with e-commerce products?
No, a practicing advocate cannot be a dormant partner in a partnership firm dealing with these e-commerce products.
Okay.
Unless it's a family business. In family businesses, you're allowed to be a dormant partner. Otherwise, you cannot. Our bar does not permit.
The second question is, one of the persons in the audience is a doctor. So he says, I'm a doctor, along with my sister who's a software engineer, wish to establish an LLP for making and promoting niche healthcare related apps.
Okay.
Starting from founders agreement to gamut of agreement policies, what is advisable? Is it, can you make a single LLP which makes apps or a separate entity for each of the apps?
In LLP, you can make an LLP for all of these apps depending on who your partners are. If the partners are same, then LLP for making it as in one common app should be fine enough. But however, if your partners are changing depending upon different apps that you're using, you will be requiring different LLPs for that purpose.
Access to data is the biggest concern for any new startup. Hence, they have to allocate excessively high proportion for their budget. What do you think is the way forward?
So the biggest way forward for this is getting your website policies in lined up, because most of these businesses that go online, they neglect the website policies. If all your rules and regulations are in place and written very in a crisp manner, which is providing every information to the customers using the websites, that will reduce to a great extent of disputes that may occur in the future. And by reaching out to all of these customer bases, I feel the click wrap contract option is the best option, where you have all your terms and conditions specified and it has an I accept tab. But this, there is just no way that a person can dispute on the fact that, oh, I didn't know these rules and regulations governing the website. Hence, that's the best way you can reach out to all of these consumers.